Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see around me, it's tropical houseplants. So today's video is one that's been much requested, and I'm finally getting around to doing it, and it is a quick and dirty, quite literally, tour of the conservatory. So bit of ground rules for this one. Please don't judge, because I have not had time to clean up or tidy up. And I am just flying with this now, because the more I think about having to do all of those things, the more this video isn't going to happen. So bear with me. And essentially what you're going to see is truly unfiltered, the conservatory. I'll talk about some of the questions that have come up. I will kind of walk around and kind of briefly talk you through things. I might be in the camera, I might not be in the camera. It's tricky. I don't have anybody to hold the camera for me, so it might be a bit shaky as well. But apologies, and hopefully you enjoy. Let's go. Okay, so for now at least I'm in the camera, and we'll walk around and you can see. So you can see behind is the house, and that's the door. What you can see there is the sliding door that comes into the conservatory. I'll show you kind of the ceiling. You can see the ceiling fan. For the people that have been here a while, they know a lot of the times when I've got taller plants and I'm trying to lift them up, I'm trying to not decapitate the plant. That right there is the reason why. But yeah, coming in from the conservatory, you can see on the side here, I've got one of the first fans that you're going to see around the room. And this is pointing towards the shelf that is, let me spin you around, right behind me now. And you can see that this is where all of my shinglers are moving up the wall. And what I've done here, before anybody asks, is I've got essentially waterproof membrane that you would use for things like ponds, because I want to give the plants something that they can attach to without me worrying that they're going to ruin the brickwork of the house, essentially. But you can see here some of the plants that generally need a bit more of the brighter light, because the windows behind them there are kind of southern facing. So, and another thing that you might be able to see right up there, at the moment it's kind of bunched up and pulled together, that is a net curtain. And the net curtain is obviously for the summer months, where you get a lot more of that bright light coming in, and you'd get scorching on the leaves, essentially, and that's how I kind of avoid the scorching on the leaves. It doesn't look like the most pretty thing in the world, but I want to keep the plants happy, essentially. You might be able to see, I don't think you will, I'm trying to see at the moment, on the beams, on those support beams that you can see up at the top there, there are hooks or nails, and basically you'll see in a minute, I've got shade cloth that happens in the summer months just to create and give a bit of shade to the plants in the conservatory. Interestingly enough, I started off thinking, oh, I'm only going to need a 30% shade cloth, and that should be more than enough. Unfortunately, I spent all that money and got a shade cloth that I could, three shade cloths that would, because that's kind of what's needed to cover the entire ceiling of the conservatory at 30%, and it wasn't dark enough. Basically, I was still getting bleaching on the leaves. So I ended up going, I think, with 70% shade cloth. 70? No, 50%. I was trying to find 70%, but I went with 50. Had I have done it again, I would have gone for 70. Yes, 100%. But you can see this is kind of where I've got the big variegated allocation. I'm trying to see if there's any leaves that I can show you that are quite obviously variegated. It's the wrong time of the year to see the variegation in this alocasia, clearly, because this is when the leaves are getting a bit darker, essentially. So that's what's there. The humongous Bravuramosa that is happening there as well. I've also got further down on the shelves, you might be able to see just peeking up there, that is the Melanobulata, so the begonia with the little black spikes. And you might be able to see, if I bring this around, and let me see if I can flip the camera so I can see what you're seeing. So looking around, I've got a lot of propagations here. I've got This here is the variegated Adansonii that I got from a very dear friend who has sadly reverted. There was only a tiny bit of white on one of the leaves and I've cut it and tried to bring it back. It's still not happened. This is a Monstera obliqua Columbia. And I've got some of the shinglers further down. I've got ferns that are dying a death. You can see the mess that is happening down there, but you can also see that everything is in self-watering, and these are all the hydrospikes. And when I said dirty and quick tour, I wasn't lying. So you've got plant ties, plant velcros, turkey baster, which might be an interesting one for a lot of people. Turkey baster is I use it to suction out water underneath drip trays, larger drip trays that I can't easily remove the water from there. Obviously I've got a pair of scissors and I've got some alcohol there to spray down the scissors when I'm taking cuttings. Not everything is in some really cool pots. This is an old ice cream container, but I needed something for a crawler, so that was nice and cheap. And let me flip you around again, and let's continue on the other side. Okay, and I'm going to try to orientate again. We've got the door here on the other side. You might be able to see at the top I've got one of my variegated monsteras. Right at the top I've got a hydrometer, I've got a clock, and I've got some amazing art that I got, and my staghorn fern. And you might be able to see if I kind of want to see how I can do this so you guys can see a bit clearer what I'm looking at, basically. Hopefully that's not too shaky, basically, but you can see here I've got some of another crawler. So this is a mamei, which I was trying to grow up, but realized that it's would prefer to crawl because it's a crawler. So yeah, Plamanii at the back. And let me flip you around again and I can talk you quickly through that shelf as well. So again, looking at the fan, the Veitchii is there. I've got my Seismorii, and for those who might be interested, that is Lola, the dog, which you might be able to hear sometimes when she's barking in the background. She's a very, very old 12-year-old English bulldog, so bless her, she's sleeping for most of the days. There's another fan down there. There is a string of hearts. The prop box, interestingly enough, isn't... Oh, there's also a very, very well hidden Forgetii right at the back there that you might be able to see. There's also a bit of a forgotten Rhaphidophora tetrasperma that you might be able to see right there in that pot. But this is a prop box full of seedlings to go into the allotment. The other thing that you might be able to see there is some very dirty trays that I need to clear up, and I'll explain the floor situation in a minute. But these are the trays that I use, and I put them on the table that you'll see in a minute. And I water all my plants in there, and it's got a lovely little spout so I can kind of dump out the water and kind of keep watering. Then you've got the Gloriosum that's growing quite nicely, and a propagation box which pretty much had other plants in there, but at the moment this is all Anthurium seedlings to the nth degree, basically. So there's some crystallinum, there is some vitarifolium, and there is also some metallicum in there as well. Underneath that, I've got storage boxes and some calathea. The storage boxes have got growing media and just general tut that I want to push away. Then you've got the shelf, obviously, with the Gloriosum further up. You've got some of the other philodendrons, all pretty much in pon at this point. You've got the gigantic Esmeraldense. You've got the huge now Amphioxus. And again, you can see the other side. What you can see there on top of the glass is not glass, technically, it's polycarbonate. That is bird poop. But yeah, that's one of the other shelves on there. I've also got some propagations going at the bottom there, and they are just in self-watering, and you can see some of the albos are crisping up, but there are some LED grow lights. You've also got some of the peperomias on here. I did a recent tour of this shelf a while ago. You've got the verrucosum, and yeah, just a whole bunch of propagations. Let me flip you around again. Okay, so this is a scene that you guys might be more used to. So obviously there's Meryldensis behind me here. You might then be able to see that behind me there is the Squamiferum. And yeah, moving on to the next shelf, which is where I've got some of the bigger boys. Essentially, this is where I've got my Pedatum, I've got my Painted Lady, I've got the Splendid Melanochrysum. This is struggling a bit. There was a bit of an issue of it trying to acclimate to Pon, but this is the Ploumanii, one of the two Ploumanii that I've got, the Golden Goddess at the back. And right there is the Philodendron Florida Ghost. And moving along, you've got the Vitarifolium, which is struggling a bit with some of its older leaves. I have moved it into Pon now because I think it was drying out a bit too much. Some more of the Propagations and other philodendrons on there. As I said, this is going to be a bit more of a quick and dirty. What you might be able to see right behind me up there is a bunched up shade cloth, and that shade cloth is one of the few ones that I've kind of left on there because it's going to be easy. And unfortunately the Hoya imperialis has grown through it, so I didn't want to cut the poor plant, so I've kind of left it on there and put it all up. And you can see quite how janky it is. I've also got wires that are holding up that Hoya at the moment in the ceiling, and you might be able to see one of the things that I'm constantly struggling with the conservatory right there. You can see a bit of darkness on those columns is mold, because essentially at this level of humidity, even with the fans circulating the air as much as they are, you will always get things like mold. So at least every couple of weeks I will kind of move things away slightly and wash things down with bleach pretty much at that point. So but yeah, then you've got, and let me turn the camera around again. Fortunately, sorry for all the backwards and forwards, but this is the best way that I can think to do this. Then you've got the lower shelf of that same, shelf, essentially, the lower tier. So you've got the White Princess, which, that one and the Monstera albo, as soon as I cut them, they threw a hissy fit, and all their white bits turned crispy. Also, for the eagle-eyed amongst you and who might not be from the UK, right there, the white thing that's on the wall behind the shelf is a radiator that's attached to the central heating of the house. So for people asking how it's heated, that is one of the ways that it's being heated. There's also a bit of a ledge that you're seeing around where there's more plants on it. The poor retired Levoit humidifier down there. There's another prop box here. There's some more perlite and everything, but this prop box has got things like pink princesses, it's got siltopicanas, it's got some of the Prancifolia alocasia, it's got some silver dragons, alocasias. It's a whole bunch of things that are happening in here. There's some more propagations that are happening on the other shelf at the bottom. All of these have got grow lights at the top of them. And yeah, there's more large containers. There's little terracotta feet. These are really cool because you can get a few of these, put them underneath your larger plants if you can move them, and then water them, and then the water will drain freely. There's more fans, a whole bunch of extension leads, and that's the crystallinum that's very difficult to get out of there now because it's kind of truly around the shelf. There is also a second crystallinum growing. Oh, and there's a little baby leaf. That's so exciting. But yeah, you can see the levels of humidity and what they're causing, which is part of the reason why this conservatory is getting replaced very soon. You've got some of the other plants that are in reservoirs with Pon. You've got the big mama jamma of Philodendron Burley Marks variegata. There's some more fans. There's a bigger fan behind the ring light. And you can see dotted around the room, I've obviously got my humidity gauges, a bag of aerial roots from one of my albos. Then you've also got the plumeria, which is there at the back. It's dropped all of its leaves at the moment. And you can see again, there's a bit of damage to the door there. And also that is my variegated spiral ginger. But let me flip you around, let me put you onto the actual ring light and let's have a bit of a chat. One last thing that I wanted to show is the view from a different angle but down. So there you've got a dehumidifier. You've also got a little radiator there that's supplementing the heat because that radiator in here isn't enough. There's a little bistro table and some chairs. Again, apologies for the mess, but as I said, it is difficult to tidy. Okay, so back to this. I'm a bit more comfortable with this. And apologies again about all the shaking and moving. So, a few other things to note, basically, about the conservatory itself. So the conservatory itself is quite old. I think it's about 30-year-old conservatory. When the house was bought, it was already here, so we didn't have to build it from scratch again. But it is a wooden conservatory. It was also a horrendous, like, muddy brown color before moved in. So had the painter decorators in, got them to lay on the most waterproof paint that they could possibly use, ones that's kind of used usually for the outdoors, because I knew that this was going to have a high level of humidity in here, and I knew that there was always going to be a bit of an issue potentially with some mold and mildew, but I can clean that up. But I just didn't want the wood to get saturated with that humidity, essentially. Some of the paint you might have been able to see on the lowish, kind of underneath the windows, is flaking a bit. So there was possibly already some moisture within the wood before the paint even went on it. So unfortunately, that is the case. To clarify, this entire conservatory is getting replaced with an aluminum frame one with better double glazing. The ceilings, as you can see, they're not actual glass. They are polycarbonate with a gap in between. They're not sealed properly, which means it loses so much heat in the winter, and in the summer it lets in a lot of the heat. The fan obviously does help a bit with that, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fans, I think, that are going at any one time in here. The floor, you saw it was a bit messy, but my kind of practice with the floor, first thing is that there was a horrendous linoleum floor. No, there was carpet in here before like the house was purchased and we moved in. That was ripped up. Apparently underneath that there was like linoleum from like the 80s or 70s. But that was all ripped up, and what you could see is kind of strips, and they're a bit like laminate flooring. They're strips of vinyl. And the reason why I put that in here, and it's pretty much on the rest of the house as well, is because on a couple of other properties, and if you've never experienced it, it's really cool because it does look and have the texture of vinyl, laminate, or maybe even real wood at some points. But it is so waterproof, it's ridiculous. I remember in the previous property, there was a leak. There was a point where there was water sitting on the floor for a good few days. It was submerged. No problem whatsoever. And it's been the case in here as well. Really easy to clean. It doesn't scratch with all the pond that you saw that's kind of spilled down on the floor. But generally happen, believe it or not, the mess that you've seen on here is only about a week old. Because what I'll do is, as long as nothing spills and it's more kind of dry material that's fallen down, and maybe some dried leaves and things like that, I'll let it do what it needs to do. And then once every few days, once every week, depending on if I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of repotting and it's going to get messy again, I will then come in here, I'll give it a quick sweep. I might even bring a small hoover and vacuum up, and then just do a quick mop. But that is pretty much all that I need to do in this place. If I had to do that daily, that'd never happen. But yeah, bit of a quick and dirty tour. Hopefully this is what everybody wanted to see. If there are any questions about the conservatory that I've missed, I think there's one that I'm thinking of just now. Is it expensive to heat up? Yes. Was it here before? Yes. Is it getting replaced? Yes. Is that going to be expensive? Yes. Will make your eyes water if I tell you how much it's going to cost to replace it. but definitely made my eyes water when I found out how much I'm going to need to pay to replace it, but well worth it. And also, if I don't replace it now, there's not as much damage in here, but on the outside, there's so much rot that's happening on the wood that I've had to put in expanding foam and kind of treat it just so it can survive another year or two. I'm hoping only a year and it'll get replaced this year, but remains to be seen in terms of funding. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. Any more questions, comments, drop them down below. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.